From Tampa Bay streaming news leader, this is ABC Action News, tracking Idalia.
Welcome in and thanks for joining us here on ABC Action News at 5. I'm Jamison Euler.
And I'm Wendy Ryan. We're continuing to track Idalia, and it's 5 p.m., which means a new projected track just came out. Let's send it over to Chief Meteorologist Dennis Phillips with the very latest on that. Dennis?
Wendy, so yeah, obviously a lot of stuff to talk about. The new track just came out and it has continued to move west. So let's just throw it out here right now. We've said this on social media for a couple of hours. This storm is not going to take a right turn and have any kind of an impact directly on the Bay Area as the center, as the eye. That eye is going to be way to the north and way to the west. Now, that does not mean we're not going to have impacts. We are still looking at water. But I'm telling you, the wind issues with this thing are going to be significantly lower than I think a lot of people are expecting, and that is great news, right? We have bands, and as these bands come through, a couple of things are going to go on. There's rotation in these bands, so I would expect eventually we will see a tornado watch for a good portion of the area later tonight. Within these bands, there's very gusty winds. We are now already seeing flooding conditions across the area. I have had messages from so many folks saying the water is already up, and we are not even at a high tide. So when we look at the overall scheme of things with this storm, there's your eye. You have a storm that's continuing to move due north, and it absolutely positively will not be turning into the Bay Area. What it will be doing, unfortunately, is getting a lot closer to Tallahassee. So we obviously have a lot of colleges up there. A lot of folks here have kids who are at school in Tally, and they are still forecast to be on the west side of that system. But it's going to be hurricane force winds. They are going to have power outages. And with all the trees in Tallahassee, that is going to be a real issue for that city. Obviously, they're not going to have any water because they're inland. But again, you're seeing all these severe thunderstorm warnings that are going on inland in our area. These are the bands that are rotating through the area. But as we go back and look at this storm, I'm telling you, these wind totals are just not going to be very significant. Now, especially if you live east of I-75. I mean, if you live in Polk County, you typically get these storms. Polk and Hardy always seems to get nailed as these storms go across and go right through the state. Not this time. You're going to see some wind with bands. You're going to see some rain. But the sustained winds closer to the center, nowhere near Polk County. So the way I see it right now, the areas that will have the highest wind by far will be coastal areas, and that's probably winds of about 45 to 55 miles an hour. So when you see these hurricane warnings across the area, you would think a hurricane warning is sustained winds of 75 miles an hour or greater. I just don't see that happening. But the problem now is this thing is getting stronger. It is now Category 2 with winds of 100 miles an hour, and it is still moving due north at 16. So again, take it off the table, the possibility of this going anywhere near the Bay Area as a direct hit. I think the farthest east it could be might be Steinhatchee, and that's well to the north even of Cedar Key, but more than likely it's going more west because, again, what's happening is there's a big blocking high out here, and it's a little stronger than the models were allowing early on, so it's keeping it from having even the possibility of turning, and it's accelerating it faster to the north. So you have a strengthening hurricane moving pretty quickly, heading toward the Panhandle. Seems to happen more often than not, doesn't it? The Panhandle, just because for the longest time, we've talked about this. Hurricanes want to go poleward. They want to go north. And the stronger they are, the more likely they'll go that way. So here is the new track. And again, as you see right here, expected as a Category 3 hurricane. You know, there's an outside chance this could even go 4 because a 130 mile an hour wind would be Cat 4, 131. And while that is not the forecast, it is really going through some pretty rapid intensification right now. So over the next 12 hours, it's in prime areas, prime ingredients to develop further. So as you see right here, that is landfall. The last advisory, the landfall was there. They've pushed it back to the west even more because of that ridge I talked about. So this should still stay just to the east of Tallahassee by maybe 20, 25 miles. The good news, and I got to check the new numbers on this, but the hurricane force winds around the center don't extend very far at all. Last I checked, they're probably only about 25 miles. And then you no longer even have hurricane force winds. And the extreme winds, guarantee you, they're only about 5 miles out. So you literally have to be right in the path of this storm to have the extreme winds right around the eye wall. And here's another perfect example of this. Look how small the hurricane force winds are in comparison to the tropical storm force winds. And as it goes north, again, and these are the new numbers that just came in, so we were focusing in on the Bay Area. So we certainly expect tropical storm force gusts in our area, 40 to 55 with some of these bands. But sustained winds anywhere near hurricane force, it ain't happening. We're just not going to see that. We will have some of the water, and by far, the water is the biggest issue with this. Again, we're already seeing flooding, and we still have 2 major tides to come through later tonight and again tomorrow afternoon. And then, won't even really get into it, but some of the models are trying to loop it back around down the road, so we'll see how that happens. So, I mean, there's a look at the euro and the winds, and I'll put some pause points in here. These new data numbers just came in, but quickly, no more than 50, 55 along the coast, gusts at any point in time. So here's Futurecast, all right? So we go through the evening, and you will see bands come through. And with these bands, some gusty winds, that's going to cause the power to flicker. But considering by far the strongest winds are going to remain offshore, and you can even see tonight at 10 or 11 o'clock, where's the center? Way down here, moving due north still. Maybe by then, slightly east of due north. And then that's when we start to see the heavier bands come in between midnight and 6 a.m. Okay? So that, and we'll be here all night long. We'll be here. And even if you lose power, it's always a good idea to download our app because you can watch us on your streaming app. And we'll make sure we tell you how to do that stuff coming up through this newscast, because there's really nothing worse than being stuck in a storm at night with no power and having no idea what's going on around you. So we got you covered on that. We'll be sure to give you the information you need to download the app so you can actually watch us. But you can see from midnight to about 6 or 7 a.m., that is when we're going to have our heaviest rain. That's when we're going to have our strongest winds. And I do think those winds of 40 to 55 are certainly a possibility along the coast. But inland, it's just not happening. I mean, you might see 30, 35, maybe gusting a little bit higher. And then the track, as you see by Wednesday, later in the morning, landfall somewhere between Steinhatchee and probably Appalachie Bay. And that will be sometime late morning. And then it will die out pretty quickly. But in terms of Tallahassee, and I really do want to focus on Tally quite a bit, because even more so than Gainesville, because look at the track. You know, folks who have kids at UF, you know, that it's going this way. So Gainesville is okay. But Tallahassee will be probably within 20 miles of the eye. Now, if it's the left side, the winds are far less than the right side. But we'll see, again, if it continues to shift a little bit more. I mean, we're talking baby steps here, maybe 5, 10 miles. But that 5, 10 miles can be a huge difference. And then for us tomorrow, the winds again begin to subside. And the tides are the key to everything. Again, with this storm, we've been talking about this for days now. It is a storm surge issue. The rainfall potential, with some of these bands, we are going to see several inches of rain. Inland, not as much. But I think a solid area of 3 to 5 inches of rain with these bands are very likely. Some areas are going to get a lot less. Some are going to get more. But that's going to be the good news out of it. This has not changed. The storm surge forecast, even though the track continues to move away, the water potential for our area, mainly because it's such a high tide, it's the king tide of the month, right? So 4 to 7 feet seems very likely. There's going to be areas that will see hardly any surge, and then you go a couple of blocks down the road and you'll see 4 or 5 feet of surge. It really depends on the positioning that you face in relativity to the water. Now, on my Facebook page, I posted a link, and it's a great link, because what it does is you click on it and it gives you a Google map, and it shows you in your area what the expected surge will be. It's huge. So if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see the link, and I think we can probably get on abcactionnews.com as well. In fact, I'll go talk to the folks and ask them about that, because you need this. If you live on the water and you're concerned about how high this water is going to be for you, it's going to be really helpful. You click on this link, and it's a NOAA product, comes from the Hurricane Center, and it will show you exactly what the forecast is for your house when you look at that, and that's huge. These are the high tides. It's the last thing I'm going to talk about for right now. So these high tides are the important numbers, because we're getting water up now and it's low tide in some areas. So obviously, if that's the case, then you're adding 2 or 3 feet of water from low to high tide. You see what we're talking here? This thing is pushing some serious water. That does not impact people who have no access to the Gulf. Again, be very clear about storm surge. Nothing to do with rain, nothing. Storm surge is water being pushed in from the Gulf into the bay and into anything that feeds the bay. So as that water is pushed in, it hits a wall wherever the end of that body of water is, and what happens? It rises, right? So these high tides are when the water is already at the high point of the month anyway. So watch your tides. Check out that link. It's on my Facebook page, and I'll make sure that it's on ABC Action News as well as our app coming up very shortly to help you for the next 6 to 12 hours to know, because if you're under a mandatory evacuation and you still haven't evacuated because you're thinking, I'm not going to get some water, maybe you can look at this and that'll tell you exactly that you still have time to get inland, because you don't have to evacuate a long way. We got nothing to worry about with wind. It's all about the water and how high it goes in your area. We'll have more on that coming up in a couple of minutes, guys.
We're going to check back with you shortly. Thank you, Dennis.